So, how does a country even begin to create its most important document? I mean, we're not just talking about some dry set of laws here. We're talking about a pact, a promise a nation makes to itself, something that's forged right out of the fires of history and the hopes for a much better future. Today, we're going to dive deep into the fascinating story of constitutional design. All right, here's the game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the incredible, dramatic birth of South Africa's Rainbow Nation. Then we'll step back and ask, why do we even need a rule book like this in the first place? From there, we'll jump over to witness India's midnight tryst with destiny, try to uncover the very soul of a constitution, and finally, really get our heads around how these documents make a promise to the future. Okay, let's kick things off in South Africa, a nation that was once defined by one of the most brutal systems of racial discrimination the world has ever seen, apartheid. Just picture this. You're walking up to a public beach, and you see a sign. It reads, "This bathing area is reserved for the sole use of members of the white race group." I mean, that was the cold, hard reality of apartheid in South Africa. Segregation was the law of the land. A small minority of white Europeans had total control over the native black population. Everything was separate. Trains, schools, hospitals, you name it. It was a system literally designed to crush and control. But in the face of that kind of oppression, resistance always rises. And a key leader of that resistance was, of course, Nelson Mandela. When the regime put him on trial for treason, he stood up, defiant, and declared that his fight for a democratic and free society was an ideal for which I am prepared to die. Wow, those words became a rallying cry for freedom fighters everywhere, but they also got him sentenced to life in prison. Now, this road to freedom was incredibly long. I mean, we're talking decades. The African National Congress, the ANC, led countless strikes and protests. The government, of course, responded with brute force. But the struggle, it never stopped. And then, finally, in 1990, after 28 long years in prison on Robben Island, Nelson Mandela walked free. And everyone knew apartheid's days were numbered. And this is where the story takes an absolutely incredible turn. The party that had oppressed people for so long and the party that had led the fight for freedom actually sat down at the same table. I mean, think about that. Instead of revenge, they chose reconciliation. They chose to build a new rainbow nation and to draft one common constitution for everyone. So that whole South African example, it's the perfect lead-in to a really fundamental question. Why does any country need a constitution? What's its job, really? Just try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. The oppressed and the oppressor are now supposed to live together as equals. The black majority, rightfully, wants to make sure their new democratic power is real. Meanwhile, the white minority is terrified of losing their property, their privileges. How on earth can you trust each other in a situation like that? Well, the solution was a written guarantee. A set of supreme rules that absolutely everyone, including any future government, would have to follow, no exceptions. And this set of basic rules, that's what we call a constitution. It's the ultimate rulebook. Now, this rulebook has 4 really crucial jobs. First off, it generates trust, which is the glue that lets different kinds of people live together. Second, it's the blueprint for government, laying out exactly how leaders are chosen and who gets to call the shots. Third, it acts as a shield, protecting citizens by limiting what the government can do and guaranteeing their rights. And finally, it's a vision, a statement about the kind of good society people aspire to build together. Now, this need for an ultimate rulebook, it's not just a South African thing. Not at all. At almost the exact same time, halfway across the world, a very similar story was playing out. A new nation, India, was being born, and it was facing its own incredible set of challenges. I mean, the people making India's constitution were dealing with a perfect storm. The country was born out of a violent partition that killed at least 1 million people. There were hundreds of these independent, princely states that had to be convinced to join the new nation. The future looked anything but certain. But even with all that chaos, the work got started. The document was put together by a constituent assembly of 299 members. And even though they weren't elected in the way we think of today, they represented a huge diversity of regions, languages, social groups, and political opinions from all across India. And this famous speech from Jawaharlal Nehru, India's very first prime minister, just perfectly captures the feeling of that moment. He called it a tryst with destiny, a moment filled with so much hope, so much responsibility,
and the feeling of a whole new era being born.
So, okay, they've got this massive task. Where do they even start? What should guide them? Well, they looked to the values that had fueled their long, long struggle for freedom. They went looking for the nation's soul. Years before independence was even in sight, Mahatma Gandhi had already sketched out his dream. He dreamed of an India free from inequality, an India where even the poorest person would feel like they had a real voice. This vision of equality and harmony, that was a guiding light for the assembly. But, and this is so important, it wasn't all just about dreams. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was the chairman of the drafting committee, he shared that dream of ending inequality, but he also delivered a really stark warning. He worried that just giving people political equality, one person, one vote, would mean almost nothing if they didn't also tackle the deep, deep social and economic inequalities in Indian society. So how do you capture all of this? The hopes, the dreams, the anxieties, the warnings? Well, you distill it all into the Constitution's opening statement, the preamble. You can think of it as the mission statement for the entire country. It's often called the very soul of the Indian Constitution. The preamble lays out these core values in just a handful of really powerful words. It declares India to be sovereign, which means the people are in charge, secular, meaning there's no official state religion, democratic, with rulers elected by the people, and a republic, where the head of state is also an elected person. But the founders of both India and South Africa knew something absolutely crucial. Society changes. A constitution can't just be some sacred, dusty old document that never, ever evolves. It has to be a living, breathing thing. So they built in a mechanism for change. They baked in a way to update the system, the constitutional amendment. This gives future generations the power to update the Constitution so it can reflect new hopes and new realities, making sure it stays relevant.
All right, so let's bring it all home. When you boil it all down, what is a constitution? Well, it's a nation's supreme law. It's a pact born from struggle and hope. It's the official rulebook for how power works. It's an expression of a nation's soul. And maybe most importantly, it's a living promise designed for the future. We've seen how these incredible documents get made. But a constitution isn't just a piece of paper, right? It's a promise a nation makes to itself. And that leaves all of us with one final, essential question for any country, including our own: is that promise being kept?